Okay, guys, today we're going to kind of wrap up all of working with the slope of a line, constant rate of change, constant of proportionality. I know that it's been quite a bit of a unit, but hopefully you guys have a good understanding of how it works. Um, you've got constant rate of change, which means that this crosses a y axis. Um, and you've got constant of proportionality, which means that it just crosses at the origin. So you guys have been working with this on several different assignments. The difference between the two, one crosses the y-axis at somewhere other than 0, 0, and the other one crosses at the origin. Those are the two big things that you need to remember. What we're going to do today is you've got a packet that you're going to be working with. The packet has several pages to it, and on the front of the packet it says y equals mx plus b. I'm going to go through this entire packet with you. My expectation is that you write everything that I write down. If I write it down in the notes, you're going to write it down in your packet. When I return, I'm going to look at your notes. I'm going to look at your packet for everything that I've written down. You're going to be able to use this packet on the test that you're going to be taking this week over this entire unit. I've been told that you guys have done a fantastic job, but just to be clear, I want you to know that you must write down everything that I'm writing down for you. So that way you have all the notes. You're going to need it, it's going to help you out. So, first things first, we're going to identify what these pieces of this standard equation is for the equation of a line. The y is the output. That's what the outcome is whenever you solve this equation. So if I gave you 5 plus 3 and you told me that the answer is 8, 8 is your output. So that's kind of like your y. That's how all this works. And that's how it connects to everything you've done ever since you've been in elementary school. So y is your output. Um, m M stands for several different things. M is a slope. And in seventh grade, we really don't use the word slope. Slope is the degree of the line, it's how steep the line is, whether it's really steep or not steep. In eighth grade, they talk about what slope actually means. In seventh grade, your role is to make sure that you understand that the M means slope, it means constant rate of change, it means constant of proportionality. It also, the way that you calculate M, that is your change in Y over your change in X, which you guys have done a fantastic job on. It is also something, and I'm not sure if anybody has mentioned this and how this works, but one of the things that I teach with this is that slope is also called rise over run, which when you have a rise and a run, that means you have a positive slope. And it also means sink or swim, which means that you have a negative slope. So the rise means you go up and then you go over. If you have a negative slope, which means that like maybe you have a negative 1/2 or negative whatever, you go down and over, sink or swim. That's how I describe that. The X is your input. So those tables that you've been working with where you have been substituting the X in to the equation to figure out what the Y is, that is your input. That's what you're putting in. So if I have 5 plus 3 equals 8, this is your output. This number right here and this number right here, those are your two inputs. That's what you're putting in to the equation to come up with a solution of 8. That's how it connects to everything you've ever done. And then the B, this is called the y-intercept. And one of the things that I want you guys to make sure you understand, and I'm sure that Ms. Chittister and some of the other teachers have helped you with this, is that this number is what is the number that crosses the y-axis. So wherever that line crosses on the y-axis, whether it be at positive 50, positive 2, negative 600, that number is the number that goes there. So what I typically do when I teach my kids, I tell them to write b, and I tell them to put x equals 0, and then put y equals whatever y equals on your table. So wherever it crosses, that's the number that goes there. And I'm going to show you that here in just a second. But these are the important things that you need to know from this equation. Make sure you have this because you have a quiz this week on identifying all the pieces to this. All right, we're going to jump right into the first thing in the booklet. And you've got a table here. I haven't given you any X's. I haven't given you any Y's. The reason why I haven't done that is because I wanted to talk to you about making sure that whenever you do these things, when you start working these equations, you look at them and you try to do the easiest thing that you can. Don't overdo it. Don't overthink it. Don't make it some big, gigantic thing that is so convoluted and then you get confused and chaos. This one right here, people look at it and see, oh, it's got a fraction. And fractions are not what you like. Okay. Nobody likes fractions. Nobody likes to work with them. And it looks like that's actually the second one to work with. That looks like I forgot to copy the first one. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and copy that first one. And I'm going to show you what it looks like. So I'm going to go over here to do it. And I'm going to rewrite it here. And so the equation is y equals negative 2x plus 1. You have a table that has x. You have an equation that says 2x, negative 2x plus 1, and then you have y. This is just a table. Remember, in that equation that I gave you, this is your input, this is your output. Make sure you're writing this down. And notice how this right here is your equation. It's the exact same thing. So, like I said, I didn't give you any numbers, and there's a reason for that. Pick easy numbers. Anything times 0 or anything plus 0 is the easiest thing to add or subtract, multiply, or divide. So start with 0. Let's do 0, 1, 2, and 3. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute it in. Negative 2 times 0 plus 1. Negative 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 1 is a positive 1. Negative 2 times 1 plus 1. Negative 2 times a negative 1 is a negative 2. And when you add that to 1, you get a negative 1. Negative 2 times 2 plus 1. Negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. And then negative 2 times a positive 3 plus 1, that's negative 6 plus 1 is a negative 5. So now you've got some inputs and you've got some outputs. So let's look at what the change is. The change over here in your x's, each time you're adding 1, plus 1, plus 1, plus 1. On this side, you are also adding 2. Negative 1 plus 2, I'm sorry. Hold on just a second. 1 to negative 1, you're subtracting 2. 2, negative 1 minus 2 is -3. -3 minus 2 is -5. So you've got a constant rate of change of -2 out here and a constant rate of change of 1 over here. So m is your change in y over your change in x. Look at what's changing in the y's. The y's are changing by -2. The x's are changing by -1. So your m is a -2 because this is changing by +1 and that's changing by -2. So if you were to look at this and write your equation, you have y equals -2x. We don't know our b. So what I tell students to do is I tell students to write the letter b and write x equals 0. When x is 0, the number that is your y, that is the number that goes in the b. So in this case, x is 0 and y is +1. So that means your b is +1. And is that the same equation that we have but what we started with? That's the exact same equation. So there's not a lot of math involved in here. It's just a lot of reading and paying attention and understanding the rules. So that's how we do the first one. We're going to go to the second one here, to that fraction that I know that you guys don't like looking at fractions. I'm not a big fraction person either, but here's the easiest way to do it. When you've got an equation and you've got a fraction, in this case, it's got a fraction of 4 at the bottom. So let's make things easy on ourselves. Let's count by 4s. Let's make up numbers 0, 4, 8, 12. So what I've done is I've increased that by 4, increased that by 4, and increased that by 4. So that way I have a constant rate of change with my x's. Now let's go into the equation and let's substitute it in. 1/4 times 0, because 1/4 times x and we're substituting the x in, well, anything times 0 is 0. So you can immediately see that this right here is a constant of proportionality, which means that it crosses the y-axis at the origin, which is 0, 0. So that right there tells you that it's a constant of proportionality. You're not going to have a b. So the b you won't have. No b. That's why you pick numbers that are easy for you to work with. Now, just go substitute everything in. 1/4 times 4 over 1. Well, those two cancel out. And 1 times 1 is 1. And 1 times 1 is 1, which equals 1, which means that my output is 1. Let's do the 8. 1 over 4 times 8 over 1. You have to have a fraction when you're multiplying fractions. So cross cancel. Use those skills that we've used all year long. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1, which gives you 2. So that means your output is 2. Same thing for the last one. 1/4 times 12 over 1. Cross cancel. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 1 is 1. And that gives you 3. So don't let the fractions freak you out. Use your common sense. Use the things that you know, the skills that you know. When you see a fraction and you're asked to make a table like this, come up with numbers that are easy to work with. So you've got your whole workout here. So Last we've got to do is go check this. To find our slope is the change in y over the change in x. Our y was changing by positive 1. Our x was changing by positive 4. So look, that and that are the exact same. So the equation is y equals 1/4 x. That's how all this connects together, and that's how it works. If we wanted to, we could take this and graph it, which we'll be doing here in a minute. But that's how you fill these tables out, especially when there's no numbers for you to fill in with. Make sure you have all of this. All right, let's go to the next one. You've got new equation, 3x plus 6. Like Mr. Fabro said, find things that are simple. You need to know what that, you know that this has a number here, which means that this is a constant rate of change, which means that it will have a b and it's not going to cross the y-axis. So, rule of thumb, if it has a number there, it crosses the y-axis. If it doesn't have a number there, it doesn't cross the y-axis. Those are the two differences between constant of proportionality and constant rate of change. So let's pick simple numbers. Doesn't look like we have any fractions, so let's just go simple. 0, 1, 2, and 3. The change here, we're changing it by 1 each time. Let's go plug in our numbers. 3x, 3 times 0 plus 6. Well, 3 times 0 is 0, plus 6 is going to give me 6. 3 times 1 plus 6. So 3 plus 6 is going to give me 9. 3 times 2 plus 6. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 6 is going to give me 12. 3 times 3 plus 6 is going to give me 15. So all I did was substitute each one of those numbers. Now I'm going to go look at my y. I'm going to see if it's got a constant rate of change. 6 to 9, I'm adding 3 each time. Make sure that when you're looking at these things, you pay attention to the sign because the sign matters. The sign makes a big difference. You can immediately look at this equation. This number right here is positive, so that means your slope is going to be positive. So that means your slope is going to go something like that. Oh, crap. Sorry. So you've got your change in y, your change in x. Let's go ahead and write that in. Change in y over the change in x. The change in y is 3 over 1 because the y is 3 and the change in x is 1. They're both positive. So that means my slope is 3, or 3 over 1. And my b, I'm going to use a different color. I don't like that. So my b, when x is 0, y is 6. That's that number. So if you look at how we've checked this and how we've gone through it, there is that number, and the 6 is that number. It's that simple, guys. This crosses through the y-axis, and it's not a constant of proportionality, it's a constant rate of change. All right, let's look at this next one. Another fraction that people hate. But that's okay, because I told you guys a minute ago that whenever you have fractions, make sure that you look at that bottom number. Let's start with simple things. Let's start with 0. And that bottom number is a 5. So let's add by 5s. 0, 5, 10, 15. All of these are increasing by 5s. which we know that the x is the 5 and the x is the bottom number, so we know that this number is right. Let's go plug in our numbers, and we've got 2/5 times 0 minus 3. Well, 2/5, anything times 0 is going to be 0. 0 minus 3 is going to be negative 3. 2/5 times 5 over 1. Oops. 2/5 times 5 over 1, because you have to have a fraction when you're multiplying fractions. Remember to cross cancel. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So now multiply across. 2 times 1 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1. When you simplify that, that's 2. Now don't forget there's more to this equation because you've got this part here. So now 2 minus 3. 2 minus 3 is going to give you negative 1. Do the same thing here. 2/5 times 10 over 1. Cross cancel. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 10 divided by 5 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 1 times 1 is 1. Simplify that out to 4 divided by 1, which is 4. 4 minus 3 is going to give you positive 1. Last one. 2/5 times 15 over 1. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 3 times 3 is 6. 1 times 1 is 1. Simplify to 6. 6 minus 3 is 3. When you look at all those numbers, it's not that difficult. There's a lot of work involved. And you're probably asking yourself, why do we have to do all of this? This is what businesses use to determine whether or not they are making profits, not profits. People use this for their budgets. There's so many things that these are used for. A lot of it's done through computers and Excel and things like that, but individuals have to build those programs, and you have to know how these things work in order for it to kind of connect. All right, so now let's look at this. From 3 to negative 1, we are adding 2. We are adding 2, and we are adding 2. So my slope, which is my m, my change in y over my change in x, is 2 over 5. 2 over 5 and 2 over 5. Now we're going to look at the b, which is where it crosses the y-axis. So this has a constant rate of change because it has a number right there. Well, when x is 0, y is negative 3. Looky there. Matches. All right. This next one, this time I've given you all the information in the table. I've provided all the numbers for you. Now your job is to find what the slope is, or the constant rate of change, or the constant of proportionality, or the unit rate, or whatever, and also find where it crosses the y-axis, create an equation. I did notice that several of you, whenever you were writing your equation, would put a positive, negative together. We need to get out of that habit. Going forward, I'll count off for that. There's no such thing as this. You can't have two signs together. You've got to put the correct sign. It does not mean plus minus. You've got to have whatever that is. If they're not the same, it becomes a negative. If they're the same, it becomes a positive. Make sure that you're getting in the habit of doing that. And I'll make sure that I get in the habit of stop erasing everything that I do. Maybe. Okay, we'll just We'll just forget that. Okay, so now we've got to find our m. So our m is our change in y over the change in x. And so when we look at that, now all we've got to do is use basic math. Let's go look at our x's. From 6 to negative 4, 6 is further away from 0 on the number line than 4 is. So we are adding 2 each time. So we are adding 2, adding 2, adding 2. To find our y, we are adding 4. So please make sure that you are looking at your signs. Even though this is a negative right there, look at what's happening each time this graph goes that direction. It's increasing by 2. Okay. The other thing I have students do is before you do anything else, look at your graph, find where x is 0, and circle the y underneath it, because this right here is going to be your b, which is your y-intercept. That's where it's going to cross the y-axis. Make sure that you're paying attention to that. If you know how to label your graph or your table before, this will be such an easy concept for you to get. All right, so our change in y is 4. Our change in x is 2. You must simplify that down. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. So your m is 2 over 1 or 2. Either one is correct. When we're working with slope and we're working with graphs, we don't use decimals. So if you get a decimal where the top number is bigger than the small number, you don't change it to an improper fraction. And I'll show you why here in just a few minutes. And so we've already determined that when x is 0, y is 16. So that is my b. So now you've got your m, which is 2, and you've got your b, which is 16. So your equation is y equals 2x plus 16. And that's it, my friends. That's it. That's how that works. Let's go to the next one. What's happening here from 3 to 0, negative 3 to 0, we're adding 3. We're adding 3 again. We're adding 3 again. We are subtracting 4. Subtracting 4. Subtracting 4. So you can immediately see that this is going to be a negative slope because one of your numbers is negative. If you look at all these other ones, they've all been positive. So the change in y and the change in x are what determine whether or not you have a positive or a negative slope. So my change in y and my change in x. Make sure you put the y on top, so you got negative 4 over a positive 3. It can't be simplified. Do not change it to an improper fraction. I mean, do not change it into a decimal or a mixed number. Leave it this way, because if you were to go graph it, you wouldn't be able to graph a mixed number, but you could graph this number here. So now let's go look at our b. When x is 0, what is y? Well, x is 0 right there, so y is negative 2. So now we've got those two things down. Let's go ahead and fill in our equation. Y equals negative 4/3, and the b is negative 2. This right here is what I need you guys to all pay attention to. This is what's important. This makes absolutely no sense. That is wrong, and you can't leave your equation like that. There's no such thing as negative 4/3 x plus a negative 2. I know that that's how you've been taught since all the way up to sixth grade, but now we need to start eliminating and only using that one operation. So the correct equation is going to be negative 4/3 x minus 2. If you gave me this, I would count it wrong because you need to know that those two signs can't be together. They can't have two signs together. All right, next one. You're going to have tables that are kind of all over the place. So you want to make sure that you pay attention as you're working through these. Same kind of thing, just repeat practice, guys. There's a lot leading up to this, but this is not that difficult of a concept. Shouldn't be now. So we're adding 2 each time. Down here we are subtracting 1. We are subtracting 1. So since we're subtracting on either the x or the y, it doesn't matter which one we're subtracting, we're going to have a negative slope. So let's look at our change in y over our change in x. Our change in y is -1. Our change in x is 2. A lot of you guys want to flip that, but remember that whenever you're working with slope, the y always goes on top. So you got -1 over 2, which doesn't simplify to anything. So that is going to be your m. Let's look at your b. When x equals 0, y is going to be your b. So here's 0 on x. That means that 5 is your y. So your equation is going to be y equals -1/2 x plus 5. And there you go. It's a negative slope. It does not cross the y-axis. It's a constant rate of change because it has a number there. If it didn't have a number there, it would cross the y-axis. All right, let's look at this guy here. This one's a little bit more difficult. Not that difficult, but you do have to think about things. This is where you have to pay attention to your table, and you may have to add numbers to your table to make it a bigger table so you can figure out where or if this crosses the y-axis. So let's look at our rate of change. Going from these numbers, it's obvious we can see that we're adding 1 each time. Going from these numbers on our y-axis, we can see that we are adding 7 each time. So that tells us that our change in y over our change in x is 7/1. It's going to be a positive slope or a positive rate of change. We just don't know if it's a constant of proportionality or not. Now we've got to figure out what our b is. So when x equals 0, that's what our y is. Well, on our table does not have a 0. So what you've got to do is you've got to work your way either forward or backward depending on where 0 is on your line. And we're looking for when x is 0. So we know that x is increasing by 1 each time it goes up this direction. So that means that it's going to increase by 1 from some number here. So what plus 1 equals 0? Well, that's going to be 0. In this case, it's easy because the next number is 0. Sometimes you may have a graph that may start at 2, and you may have to go back 2 different times. But if you can figure out the rate of change here, you're just going to work yourself backwards to find 0. So in this case, I'm going to be 0 plus 1 is 1, so on and so on. So let's look down here. This is increasing by 7. So what plus 7 equals 8? Well, 1 plus 7 equals 8. So that means that when x is 0, y is 1. So that is my b. So my equation is 7 over 1, or 7. So this is what I would be looking for. And so this is a constant rate of change because it does cross the y-axis at 1. So just make sure that you're paying attention to that graph so that way you know whether or not to go backwards or forwards, because you're not going to always be given that 0 unless you're given a table where you have to make your own table. All right, let's go to the next one. Now what we're going to do is you've worked with several different types of moving from a table, creating a table, putting things on a graph. Now we're going to be given a table. You're going to plot it on a graph. And like I said, we use this in the real world for all types of things. We use this for data, for seeing how your grades are throughout the years. You see this at car dealerships. You see this in doctor's offices. You see this in several different professions, budgets, different things like that. Movie theaters use it. It's not something that you sit and you write down every day, but it is something that you will use quite a bit. So let's start from the very beginning. What is happening with our x's? Going from a -2 to a -1, 0. It looks like I am adding 1 each time. So I'm adding 1 each time that I on my x-axis. On my y-axis, it looks like I am adding 2 because 4 is further away from 0. -4 is further away from 0 than -2. So you're adding 2 each time. So -4 plus 2 is -2, and so on and so on and so on. So our slope is our change in y over our change in x, which when you take your y, that's a +2 and a +1, which is a 2. Now, here's where you really don't want to simplify it down to just a whole number because you're going to need that fraction in order to create your graph. So we've got our slope. Next thing you need to do that I do not have on this paper for you, but it's something that you have to know, is what is your b? So when x is 0, what is y? Well, x is 0 here, and so is y. So what this tells you is that because y is 0, this crosses at the origin. That means that it does not cross anywhere else. It goes at the origin. That means that's where you start. So wherever your B is, that is where you start. If you can remember that, you'll be able to do these graphs with absolutely zero problems. So now that I've said that, I know that you've had so many people in and out and kind of helping you talk through this. Couple of things that I want you to know, and I think that some people have taught you this a little bit, but I want to kind of go over it a little bit. There's this thing called rise over run, and what that means, and I want you to make sure that you've written this down. Rise means that you go up, and run means that you go that direction, you go to the right. Rise over run is a positive slope. Okay, so make sure that you do know that. You can look here and you can see all of those numbers are positive, all of those numbers are positive, your slope is positive. So you're going to be using what's called rise over run. I know it sounds silly, but it is what it is. Then you've got your b, that's your y-intercept, okay? So your equation that you're writing is going to be y equals 2x, and there is no b. So you don't write a 0. You don't write anything else. This is your equation. I know that some of you guys have been putting 2x plus 0. That's fine, but don't do that because it's going to confuse you. If it's just got, if it does not have, if b is 0, you don't need to write anything else. This tells you that you're going to start at the origin, and your rise over run is your slope. So that is your y over your x. So that is 2 over 1. So what that means is you start in the middle because you have no b, you go up 2 and over 1. Up 2 over 1. Up 2 over 1. So you're rising by 2 and you're running by 1. Connect those dots, you've got your line. So remember, a line goes through the entire graph, and my graph looks really bad right now because I'm not using a straight line, but it is a straight line. If you create a graph and you do not connect the lines, it's wrong because all you're doing is plotting points on a graph. You must connect the lines. So I know that was a lot for this right here, but I want to make sure that you have all of this. All right, let's go to the next one. And I'll try to make it a little bit cleaner for you guys to be able to see. Okay. So I think what I'm going to do is over here, I'm going to write slope b and equation. I know on your paper you have slope and equation, but I want us to have b. The other thing on this graph, there is an error on it. This number right here should be a -3. We forgot to fix that when we send it off for printing, so fix that real quick. All right, let's go ahead and do this one. Our x's are, we're going from -2 to -1, so we're adding 1, adding 1, adding 1. Oops. Down here, we're subtracting 2. So immediately you can tell yourself, oh, this is going to be a negative slope, which means that it's going to go something like that. All right. So let's look at our RM, which is our change in y over our change in x, which is, our change in y is a -2 and our change in x is a 1. So our slope is a -2. But we're going to use this number because we're going to have to graph it and we need the fraction in order to graph it. Okay. So a while ago I talked to you guys about rise over run. Whenever you have a negative slope, you have what's called sink or swim. And like I said, I know it's silly stuff, but if you can remember negative is sink or swim, it's negative if you get into the water and you sink and you're having to swim to shore because you can't swim. That might help make the connection. Sink or swim, same exact thing. Change over y over change over x, except this is a negative slope, which we already determined, which is negative 2 over 1. Let's look for our b. Well, when x is 0, our b is negative 1. So we've got a slope of negative 2 over 1. We have got a b of negative 1. And so our equation is y equals negative 2 over 1x minus 1, because the b is our negative 1. So we can immediately tell that this is a constant rate of change, because it's not going to cross through the origin. So if you've got an equation that looks like that has a number after the x, it's going to go somewhere through the y-axis. So let's go ahead and graph that. We are going to start here. You always start with your b. If you don't have a b, you start at 0. If you have a b, you start wherever the b is. In this case, it starts at negative 1. So we're going to start at negative 1. We've already determined that the slope is negative. So that means we are going to sink and swim. We are going to sink 2, and we're going to swim 1. So we're going to go down 2 and over 1. Down 2 over 1. And so on and so on. And remember, these lines just don't go through part of your graph. It goes through the entire thing. So don't just stop wherever it starts here. You're going to have to maybe go backwards. So up here, we're sinking 2, we're going over 1. Sinking 2 over 1, we're continuing that line. There's your equation, there is your line, there is your x, there's everything that you need for that. All right, next one. So I've taken away the tables. Tables are easy because you can plot those points. In fact, if you look at this table and you look at this right here, that means that I could make a coordinate negative 2, 3. That's my x and that's my y. So if I started at 0 and I went negative 2 and positive 3, I'm going to be right there. If I went negative 1, positive 1, negative 1, positive 1, 0, negative 1. So that's how all this connects. And guys, you may think you don't need any of this. You will need it in life. Trust me, you will need it. Okay, let's look at this next set of things. So you've got a fraction. You've been given an equation. It's written in the form y equals mx plus b. And now what I'm asking you to do is I'm asking you to graph it. Well, in order to graph it, you need to be able to identify what the different pieces are, which you already know how to do. So you need the slope, You need the y-intercept. And those are the two things that you need. The other thing you need is you need to pay attention to this. This number right here is positive. So that means your line is going to go somewhat like that. Positive line goes up. You're going up in a mountain, going to have a good time. When you get to the top, you'll fall, and that's negative. So anytime that number is positive, that's your m, that's positive. That's the direction it's going to go. So your y-intercept is your b, and your slope, there's really no work to do here except to look at the equation. The slope is the change in y over the change in x, which I've already given you because that's what this number is. So your slope is 1/2. It's a positive. That means that you're going to rise and then you're going to run. You're going to go up and then you're going to go that way. Your b is that number. That is why whenever you write your equation, I don't want you to put plus a negative or plus a, or it just needs to be a negative or a positive so you don't get confused. So in this case, your b is -4. So this means that's where you're going to start. So you're going to go to your graph, you're going to find the y-axis, you're going to go to -4, which is right there. And then your equation, your slope, tells you to rise by 1. So you're going to rise 1. And you're going to run 2. So go up 1, over 2. Up 1, over 2. And look, Mr. Fabro did this wrong. Sorry, guys. That's a +4. This is a +4. So we are starting up here. And we're going to rise 1. And we're going to run 2. 1, 2. Rise 1, over 2. A lot of you will just do your graph like this and say that I'm done, I'm over, I'm whatever. I will count that wrong. You need to go back through and you need to make sure that you understand that that line doesn't just start there and end there. It continues to go over and it continues to go. So you need to finish your graph. Okay. So that's what it would need to look like. And that's it. You got your slope, your y-intercept. Okay. Here's the next one. We've got our slope, which is your m, which is, in this case, a -2. So that means it's a -2. And remember, a slope, constant rate of change, everything is written as a fraction. So -2 as a fraction is -2/1. And it's negative. So it's going to go something like that. And so you're going to sink or swim, or sink and then swim. So you're going to go down and then over. Your b is this number right here. So it's a +3. So that means we're going to start at +3. It tells me that I need to sink 2. So I'm going to go down 2 from where I started. So that was start here. I'm going to go down 1, 2, and over 1. So I'm going to sink 2, so a negative 2, and I'm going to swim positive 1. Sink 2, positive 1. Sink 2, positive 1. Sink 2, positive 1. Connect my graph. Connect everything. There's my graph. See, it kind of looks like that. It's going in that direction. It's a negative. There you go. All right. Now I haven't given you a table. I haven't given you an equation. I haven't given you anything to really start with. But because of everything that you've learned up to now, you should be able to look at this and be able to tell me, okay, this is going this direction, so it's positive. So I know that my change in y and my change in x, it's going to be a positive number because it's going that direction. So what you do is you look at, before you do anything, remember, b is your y-intercept, and this is where you start. So let's go look at where it crosses the y-axis. It crosses the y-axis at negative 3. So you know that this is going to be negative 3. Let's mark that out because I don't like those, because you can't have that. It's going to be a negative y-intercept. So it starts at negative 3. Okay, now what do? Let's look at this graph. And when you look at it, look to see where the points meet at specific corners. Now, I will tell you some of these graphs are off a little bit, so I'm going to help you with that. But it's the same concept. So you know that you're going to rise over run because it's positive. So let's start here. It crosses right there. It crosses right there. And it crosses right there. So since I'm going to rise, let's see how many I rise. I'm going to rise 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to run 1. Up 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. 1, 2, 3, over 1. 1, 2, 3, over 1. So my rise is 3 and my run is 1. So my equation is 3 over 1. So y equals 3 over 1x minus 3, or you can just give me this. Either one of these. If you give me this, oops, I'm going to mark it wrong. You can't have two signs together. You need to, by now you should know we don't do that. That's it for that one. Crosses the y-axis at negative 3. It's a positive slope. Next one. Okay. We immediately know by the whole slope man thing that you guys should have understood a little bit better, but anyway, we'll go from there. This is going to be a negative slope because it looks like that. So since it's negative, you're going to have sink or swim, which means one of these numbers is going to be negative. So let's take a look at what we know. We need to find, where do we start? That's where we start. That's your y-intercept. And it looks like we start at positive 5. That's where we'll start. So let's find some different points on the graph that connect right at the corners And like I said, this isn't exact because the graphs are kind of hard when we try to work these out. Um, and it actually crosses here. So we know we're going to sink by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to go down by 5. And then we're going to swim by 1, 2, 3. So we're going to sink by 5 and swim by 3. So your equation is negative 5, 3. So y equals negative 5 over 3, x plus 5. Do not change that to a mixed number. If you changed it to a mixed number, you wouldn't be able to graph this. This is the one time you don't change that to a mixed number. All right, let's go to the next one. This is a negative slope because it goes that direction. So that means that I'm going to do my change in y over the change in x, which is my sink and my swim. And that means that one of those numbers is going to be negative. Let's go look at where we start. That's the y-intercept. We start at positive 4. So that means my equation has a positive 4. I'm going to look at this line. It looks like it crosses right here. So I'm going to sink by 1. And I'm going to swim by 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to sink by 1, so it's a negative 1. And then I'm going to swim by 3. Sink by negative 1, swim by 3. Negative 1 third. So my equation equals y equals negative 1 third x plus 4. Hopefully this is starting to make sense and get a little bit easier. I know you're tired of hearing my voice, so there you go. It crosses the y-axis at at positive 3. That's where it crosses. It's non-proportional because it does not go through 0, 0. All right, let's do this last one that we're going to graph together. This is a negative. So that means it's going to be a sink and a swim. It's going to be change in y over change in x. Let's see where we start. It's not going through 0, 0, so this is where it crosses the y-axis. It crosses the y-axis at 2, positive 2. So there's my 2. It crosses here. And it continues to cross every 2. It's a little off because, like I said, whenever we put these graphs together, but for purposes of you looking at it and seeing how it works, we're going to sink. It's a negative slope no matter what. We're going to sink by 2. And we're going to swim by 2. So down 2 over 2. So the m is 2 over 2. It's a negative, so that means it's a negative 1. So that means this is a negative 1x plus 2, or negative 1 over 1. This is what needs to look like. and then you're done. Okay, the last two, guys. Here's how it all kind of wraps up and works together that businesses use, all kinds of businesses, all of those skills that we've taught you up to now lead up to this. So they lead up to writing word problems. We did this at the very beginning of the year, something that you've worked on for a while. So we're going to kind of just take a look at this. Sally wants to buy some bracelets online. Each bracelet is $3 and the shipping cost is $5. So we're going to make a table, write an equation, and then draw a graph to represent the situation. So what that means that we've got to do is, I should have made this a little bit bigger, but okay. What that means that we're going to do is we're going to take our equation, we're going to pull the main ideas out. So each bracelet is $3. So $3 per bracelet. So that means if I buy one bracelet, it's $3. If I buy two bracelets, it's $6, and so on and so on. So that's 3x. That's my mx. So 3 is my m. Shipping cost $5. So no matter what, they're going to charge me plus $5 in shipping. That is my y-intercept. That's where it's going to cross the y-axis. That's where I'm going to start. So if I need to write an equation, and which is what you'll need to do, your equation is y equals mx plus b, and you're just going to plug in those numbers. The mx is the 3x, and the b is 5. So that is your equation. So now what you've got to do is you've got to put in your number of bracelets and your cost. So remember what I said at the very beginning, make up numbers that are super simple. If I buy 0 bracelets, I'm not going to spend any money, except in this case, which doesn't make sense, but just it'll help you figure out where you're going to start on your y-axis. So let's use 0, 1, 2, and 3. So if I were to plug in y equals 3 times 0 plus 5, 3 times 0 is 0, 0 plus 5 is 5. 3 times 1 plus 5, 3 times 1 is 3, plus 5 is 8. Sorry, somebody's up on the roof. 3 times 2 plus 5, 3 times 2 is 6, 6 plus 5 is 11. Y equals 3 times 3 plus 5. Please make sure you're writing all of this down, because this is what I will be looking for. And that equals 14. So that means when x is 0, y is 5. When x is 1, it's 8. And then 11 and 14. So now all you got to do is graph that. 0, 5. There's my first point. 1, 8. Go over 1, up 8. Go over 2, up 11. Over 3, up 14. And then it would continue to go on. She could buy 600 bracelets at $3 and we could graph that. So your graph would look like this. It crosses at the y-axis there at 5, which is that number. And it goes up by 1, 2, 3. And it goes over by 1, which is that number. That's it. Super simple. Last one. Joe decides to play miniature golf. It costs $3 to rent the putter and $2 per game. So we don't know how many games, so that's 2x. So that is our mx. And this is our b. So our equation is y equals 2x plus 3, because that's mx plus b. So let's be simple again. And I know on that other one, it sounds really simple. If she doesn't buy any bracelets, why should she pay shipping? It's not the best example in the world, but it does show you that that's where it would cross the y-axis. A company shouldn't do that, but anyway, that's how that works. Anyway, same thing with this situation. If this guy doesn't go play golf, should he be charged anything? No. But for purposes of this, I'm going to show you that because I want you to see where x is 0 and what b is. So if I play 0 games, 1 game, 2 games, 3 games, and let's plug that in. Y equals 2 times 0 plus 3. So 2 times 0 is 0 plus 3 is is 3, right? $3 per putter to rent a putter, and then $2 per game. So he doesn't play any games, but he's charged $3. So 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 3 is 3. Y equals 2 times 1 plus 3. 2 times 1 is 2 plus 3 is 5. Y equals 2 times 2 plus 3, that's 4 plus 3 equals 7. Y equals 2 times 3 plus 3. 2 times 3 is 6 plus 3 is 9. So 3, 5, 7, and 9. So you know that when x is 0, y is 3, which is where it crosses y-axis. Okay, so first one is 0, 3, then it's 1, 5, then it's 2, 7, 3, 9, and so on and so on. Most of the time you won't have, if you do 0, it's going to be 0. But in this case, with this example, this is how it would be shown. Okay, now what you need to do, now that you've done everything, you need to take this and you need to glue it, tape it. What I did was I stapled it inside my journal. I stapled the last page in there. And I'll put a copy of what my journal kind of looks like so you have an example of it. But the important thing is that you have all of this. You're going to have a quiz on Tuesday over all of slope. So I'm very proud of you guys. Thank you. And now you need to work on the assignment that is due at the end of class today. If it's not done today, it is due tomorrow whenever I return on Tuesday. Thank you guys.